Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. I've got another of my interviews with executives of mining companies, and I'm very bullish on copper. What I have a harder time finding are good copper stories, and Alta Copper definitely has one, and I'm glad to have Julio Bonifacio on to talk about that. Julio, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Allan. Very much appreciate being on your program yet again.
You've been involved in the copper market for a long time, Julio, and you follow things very closely. You understand my position. I'm very bullish on copper, but I just don't find enough copper companies out there, and exploration or new mine development, which I think is crucial in the business.
Sorry, Allan, I totally agree. And in fact, during the period in which we saw depressed copper prices, many projects were not brought on stream. But when you look at, the pending supply deficit, you layer in the EV thematic, decarbonization. If anything, that deficit widens in a very significant way. And, as you would know, and many investors would appreciate, it takes a number of years from discovery to actual commercial production. And, that timeline's anywhere from, even if you fast tracked it from a permitting standpoint, anywhere from 10 to 15 years. And so I think with respects to Alta Copper, well enough advanced on the project, a company that's been around. We've hit the sort of the reset, if you will, more so in terms of, hey, we're now hitting a cycle that I think will be a super cycle on a go-forward basis, that we'll see copper prices trade in this range and arguably significantly higher. And, some pundits think, 2 to 3 times higher than where we're currently at. But we have a project that is very significant in size already. We think there's further expansion opportunity. We'll be coming out with an updated press release in the coming months. It speaks to the reinterpretation of the geology and what we see potentially coming from the very distinct deposits that we have in Cañarico Norte, Sur, and Verde. In total, and I've mentioned this in times past, 85,000 meters for a project that already sits on 16 billion pounds of copper equivalent is very significant. Most of it's in measured and indicated already, approximately 80 to 85%. So that in itself points to the level of success that Joanne Fries, the founder and president of the company, has had on the project to date. We do want to go back in and test the expansion opportunity. We think that the blue sky that sits within this project is very significant in itself, but the margins, the economics, and advancing this asset to lead into what will be a very significant cycle and deficit that is clearly coming upon us will bode well for all investors. And valuations are not yet where they likely will be in the coming years, but I do expect that to change. And yet another reason why I initially stepped in as a shareholder, and then progressively gotten more involved as a director, and now recently as executive chair.
So the Cañarico project is quite special, and it has already gone through a preliminary economic assessment with lower prices of copper, and you're doing an optimized preliminary economic assessment using Whittle Consulting. And I follow McEwen Copper very closely, and they did a fantastic job with McEwen Copper, and obviously I think they'll do a good job, and they're a big shareholder of your company as well.
Yeah, I mean that's another endorsement. I mean, in addition to the large shareholder, Fortescue Metals, $60 billion company that has a significant interest and has shown a lot of interest, and you can see that by way of the board additions recently as well. The gentleman they put on is a very senior executive within Fortescue. But Whittle Consulting, they're well known in the space for optimization of projects. They stepped into this one both by way of equity, but feel that it is a tier 1 asset. And we're going to take the body of work, the technical studies, which is at a very high standard, historically a pre-feasibility study that was done in 2011, last year a preliminary economic assessment, and going to take that body of work and look at optimizing it further and coming out with a new report by Q4. Now that's going to be looking at something that entails a higher throughput, but production threshold on an annualized basis that is pretty, very, very significant. And so, size does matter. This project does have size, the annual production that you could look at. And even if you looked at the previous pre-feasibility study in 2011 produced in the first 10 years, north of 145,000, 150,000 tonnes of copper per annum. That's enough size to move the needle for the majors. Clearly that's one of the reasons that a group like Fortescue is showing interest. They do want to move into the decarbonization and EV thematic and appreciate the opportunity relative to critical metals. So what you will see, I think, is going to be very, very exciting, and it's going to be a further study that we can look upon that will allow us to engage further discussions with several groups, but going back in a very systematic way, focusing in on getting our drill permits back, which we think we'll have, hopefully we'll be in a position to start drilling by the beginning of next year. What is a major catalyst in this optimized PEA that is coming, I think will bode well for all shareholders on a go-forward basis. And again, to start in on a project early stage exploration, that's a time-consuming effort. The benefit of an Alta Copper is we do have an advanced development asset that we can start moving forward. We can start the permitting process with Synopsys by moving forward with a feasibility study. So there's a lot of different avenues in which we can continue to advance the asset and the project. But the resource, the economics are the two driving levers in my estimation that will provide good value on a go-forward basis. And relative to our peer group, we're still well below the curve. That will change over a period of time. And it's about execution and how we mitigate risk on a go-forward basis, how we demonstrate that we do have a good relationship with the community, how we entertain, those relationships going forward, how we put in place the appropriate agreements, how we, again, get back to work in a very active way. And, we're very, very excited about the prospects in the coming months and coming years on this project specifically.
Julio, you have what the copper mining world needs. You look at the production that's happening now. Many of those mines are very, very old. So we're relying on these old mines and not enough mines in the pipeline. And so the majors, they need these kind of big projects to replace what they're mining from these ancient mines.
I mean, that therein lies what's kind of interesting for those that have followed this space. And I've been in the copper space for plus 20 years and founded a company and retired from that in 2018, stepped into another company that's doing very well. But that, I stepped away from that last year, but that allowed me to step into Alta Copper in a more significant way. But it's always been known that we're going to face deficit, declining grade profile, projects that have been in production for a number of years. You have to replace that production level. And then on top of that, and we touched on it earlier, the EV thematic, decarbonization, and going green, and the amount of copper that gets consumed. You add that all in with pre-existing production levels and realize that not many projects have been brought on stream in the last 10 to 15 years. And so without a doubt, that deficit will drive a higher copper price. Currently, if you look at copper prices, sure, they've come off a little bit, slowing growth, general uneasiness with respects to world economies, but that all, gets to a point in the coming years that you still face that deficit. And once you do that, those prices start to change. But, finding projects like Arco that have very good margins on them already. And you can look at that PEA that we put out last year, very robust. And the one that we're going to come out with, I think, will be something that highlights production levels of size, but also returns that are very, very significant. So there's opportunities that we can look at within that. But yeah, when you look at supply deficit, that was coming regardless of decarbonization and the EV thematic. Now you layer in the amount of copper you need for an electric vehicle is 3 to 5 times, what you currently use in a vehicle. So I mean, those types of levers, the amount of copper that you need for solar, for wind farms, I mean, you start adding all that up, and then also appreciate that, pretty much everything that we see uses copper. And so I think those things bode very, very well. But the space in its entirety, and you can see by the relative valuations, not just Alta, are probably a lot lower than they were in the last cycle. But if anything, they should start to rise here, and they will. And when that happens, it happens pretty rapidly. It's an interesting sector in that, day-to-day data points impact valuations, but over a period of time, if you look at it from a longer term perspective, which is what we're all doing here, I think you'll see that there's just a great opportunity within Alta Copper and other developers as well. I think without a doubt, there's other projects that they're very, very attractive, but I think ours stacks up quite nicely. And as we put out this optimized PEA and start advancing on other areas that we need to focus in on, such as community, which we're re-engaged with now, finally, we've got a fantastic relationship with them, but we've had limited capital, and we've started to turn the page on that. And that was also part and parcel of the reason for, hitting the reset and focusing in on what we think we can do very, very well. And that's, hey, why not go back in and drill it and test the expansion opportunity? 85,000 meters in itself speaks volumes, but, in terms of what it represents already from a resource endowment perspective, but, focus in on the community, do the things that we need to do. And as we do that and have success, and appreciate that, South America, Peru is a very good location, regardless of the pundits. There's going to be some general uneasiness in many parts of South America, but, last I looked, it's the second largest copper producing country in the world. And I don't think that's going to change for a long, long time. So, Allan, thanks again for having us on your program. But I think it just creates a real good opportunity for new investors and existing investors that can appreciate that, this is a project that has all the right attributes to it.
Well, some of those are that you have a top 10 in size and a top 10 in grade. And again, getting back to how badly we need more copper. I mean, even the big time guys like Stanley Druckenmiller and other people like that are pointing towards the argument for copper being very bullish for the long term. But there's just not a lot of companies out there that can say that they have a top 10 asset in size and grade and a long mine life, and that's exactly what you have. And I think that puts you in a rarefied air, Julio.
It does, without a doubt. I mean, even if you looked at the pre-existing studies, we demonstrated we had a long mine life. But as we have success by way of the drill bit, and that's something that great value opportunity for all stakeholders. If we have success by way of the drill bit, and many of the holes bottom mineralization, there's good open extent. Caniarco Sur has had only 15 drill holes and already sits on a couple billion pounds. Verde's had no drilling, has the right geological signatures. You arguably have an opportunity to create a generational resource that is in production for plus 50 years as opposed to 25 to 30 years. But we've already demonstrated that we have more than adequate mine life with respects to any of the study work that we've done historically. So I agree. And one of the comments I've put forth to certain individuals and strategic groups is that, to start in on and identify an asset and go through the extensive amount of drilling that's required and do the study work, that does take a fair bit of time. And I've gone through that process with the previous company that I was a founder of. And I was there for 12 years and advanced it appropriately, got it permitted. And another group came in and went plus 50%, which was an ideal time for me to step back and retire, and stepped into another project as well that's doing extremely well. So when I look at Caniarco and the opportunity and what it represents, and appreciate that there's areas that we need to focus in on and work on. I think we can demonstrate that we can have success with that. But you look at the space, for the last 10 years, it's been pretty challenging. When copper prices started to erode in 2014, 15, and anytime you go to a copper price that goes below $5,000 a ton, many projects can't wash their face at that level. And then you look at the amount of capital that you need to take a project into production. Large copper projects, and I'll give you a general range, for the discussion, but it's $1 billion to $3 billion, and in some cases more. When you look at that amount of capital, in order to generate adequate returns, you need margin, but you also need a copper price. And if you look at what copper prices have done since 2015 to date, we're now finally getting into a range that creates projects that have an adequate return. And then if you look at what copper prices arguably may trade at in the next 5 years, that all will justify further projects that come on stream. And projects like ours, definitely have been identified by certain groups, research groups and others, and even strategic groups as a group that's starting to draw the interest that's warranted for a project of this size.
And I think that another trend that you're going to see in the not too distant future, Julio, is that the end users that need this critical metal of copper are going to start getting more active with the mining companies, because they need to they know how hard it is to get copper and secure long-term supply that they need. And I think that trend is just starting and will last for many, many years.
You're actually starting to see that as well. The streaming transactions, there haven't been as many as there were historically with various streaming private equity groups. The offtake transactions with the various traders, that is all starting to ramp up here. You're starting to see more and more royalty sales as another opportunity. I would add that, in our project, Joanne's done a fantastic job mitigating the burdens. It's only got a 0.5, a 0.5% royalty on it, which is, by comparison, very, very, very modest. And so there's levers that we can look at that'll give us the funding that we need to move forward with drilling and move forward with the additional study work that we need to do. When I say study work, again, any company that can move a project in the PFS or feasibility study range is a clear indication that it's an advanced development asset. It's not an early stage exploration asset. So, you add in success by way of the drill bit, you add in the ability to move to feasibility, you start the permitting process officially with Synasys by way of commencing that feasibility exercise, which we can arguably do on Caniarco Norte on its own because it's already of size, and we've demonstrated that historically we put forth a pre-feasibility study. All these things point in the right direction, and educating the audience. I mean, there's certain pundits that speak to valuation, but they have to appreciate that you need capital to advance the projects and the companies that one looks at. And with Alta, we just did a financing at the beginning of this year, and that allowed us to hit the go button, if you will, on many of the initiatives that we've put in place recently. So I think we're in a fantastic position here to take advantage of what we see coming in the space and the sector.
Perfect way to end it on, Julio. Did you have
Thank you so much, Allan.
We're good to go. You got any closers there? Oh, the symbol. You better tell everybody the symbol.
Oh, I am so sorry about that. I think that I would have done that at the very beginning. Yeah. Alta Copper, ATCU, and also trades on OTCQX at ATCUF. And so good exposure relative to allowing investors to step in and acquire a position. And I would add further that we did a share consolidation, did a name change, but we're trading in a very good range. And you can see that by way of market activity, there is good interest by way of the various bids that are in place. But as we execute in the coming months and come out with the optimized, updated PEA that shows that we can produce close to 300 to 350 million pounds of copper per annum with fantastic economics, I think that's just simply going to be a further validation on why investors should consider stepping in currently. And do watch the copper tape. And I think much of what we spoke about today, Allan, will bode well relative to what we see in the coming months and coming years in terms of copper and copper supply deficit, and what that ultimately means, and how valuations change across the board, not just for Alta Copper, but other copper developers. And transactions will drive valuation. And we are in several discussions. We'll continue with those discussions. We're very mindful of value. We do have that big shareholder. We're not interested in selling this project at a discount, but we will say that they've been very supportive in the most recent 12-month term, and we expect that to continue. And this is exactly the type of projects that they're looking for. But there's other groups that are reaching out to us as well. And so these discussions
Found
take
it,
time.
I found it interesting that you, the person they added to your board is a mine building guy. Obviously, the Fortescue thinks that you got something to build there.
I'm glad you highlighted that. I mean, oddly, some investors don't realize that when you look at who they have on the board and you look at who they've recently added, he's a key member to their team. Starting in 2008, building out their lead asset, and recently executed on a $3 to $4 billion project, magnetite project, I believe it was, and for them to appoint him to our board, and it is coming from the very senior ranks within Fortescue. And so that we're not dealing with middle manager or
Senior mine building guy.
Exactly, but those decisions are being made by the CEO and the chairman and other individuals that we deal with. So I think that also is a positive indication that the interest that we're starting to see in our space will continue, and with groups like Fortescue and other groups as well.
Perfect, Julio. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Allan. Appreciate it as always, and look forward to speaking to you again.
Okay, I'm going to close it off and we can talk at the other end.
Sounds good.
Okay. No,
okay.
You can watch in on the close. As always, I like to wrap things up, and I started the conversation by saying I'm very bullish on copper, but finding good copper stories in the exploration and the development stages is very difficult. And I think that kind of makes the argument for why to be bullish on copper as well, because the supply chain needs more exploration and new mine development to meet all the demands from the sources that Julio talked about, and also the need for the ancient power grid in the United States to be rewired to do a lot of this electric vehicle revolution. But there just isn't enough in the pipeline. Even what is being mined today, it's being mined in very old mines that are going deeper and deeper for lower grade and tougher jurisdictions. This points to a much higher price for copper. And then when you are an investor looking at the space, you don't have a very big menu to look from. And one of those on that menu of development projects is Alta Copper, which has a top 10 asset in size and in grade. As Julio said, a generational type opportunity, which is the kind of thing that major mining companies are interested in. And also the companies that need copper are also interested in those kind of projects because they need to secure supply. And I think it's really important to note that their big shareholder, Fortescue, has the right to put a person on the board of directors, and they put a mine builder on there. Fortescue knows what they're doing, and when it comes to building mines, and they didn't put a corporate development guy on there. They put one of their top mining guys on the board of directors. So that's a sign that they think there's a mine to be made here. And so that's my wrap on why I think you should take a look at and do your homework on Alta Copper. As always, my shows are for information purposes only. It's important for you to do your homework, speak with your advisors. Alta is a sponsor of my shows, and they pay me a fee. But I do my homework the same for sponsors or non-sponsors, and it all comes down to the merits of the project, and that's what I talk about on the shows. And I invite you to check out their website, do your homework, and check out their corporate presentation. And I think you'll find out why I'm very bullish on Alta Copper. On that note, have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.